In just a few short days, the story that began over a decade ago, the Klaus saga, will reach its ultimate conclusion when Xenoblade Chronicles 3 Future Redeemed releases on April 25th, 2023. Hey everyone, it's Yggdrasiel and welcome back to another Xenoblade Chronicles video. And today I'm going to be giving you all my complete analysis of absolutely everything that Monolith Soft and Nintendo has shown us so far regarding the Wave 4 DLC story, which we now know is called Future Redeemed. Obviously, with the Xenoblade Twitter posting midnight daily, there will be just some things that I'm going to be missing, but they're most likely going to be just quick glances at things I've already covered or seem vague at best. At least that's my hope anyway. In any case, I'll be covering absolutely every detail about the trailer and pretty much everything else that we know so far regarding the game. And what's more, the information that we've gotten so far has all but confirmed every single leak from the past few months regarding the DLC story. And I mean just about every single one of them. So if you're a little interested and want to see a little more, please consider checking out my previous videos discussing those leaks. Now, you may ask yourself, Yggdrasil, why are you bothering to do this? There's not even a week before the game is released. Why put in so much effort? Well, it's for the same reason as all my other videos. It's for my own personal hype for such a wonderful franchise to be concluding this arc in its journey to tell the stories that they want to tell. So let's get right into it. I'll be starting off by dissecting the entire Future Redeemed trailer with input on some snippets that they show from Twitter, and then I'm gonna just talk about those parallel topics and my own personal theories. At the very end, I'm just gonna briefly talk about what wasn't discussed. I truly hope you all enjoy, and with all of that said, let's get stuck into the video. We first start off with a scene of our new protagonist, Matthew, the founder of House Vandom himself, stumbling around the city after the assault by Mobius N. He then runs across his grandfather, Gondor, who was stabbed and then murdered by N himself, and from his body emits a wave of energy that reminds me of the light emitted when an Ouroboros stone activates. As Gondor yells out for Matthew to protect both his sister Niel and the future itself, a devastating beam of light, different than the previous one, blasts the epicenter of the city, right on top of several citizens and Niel herself. There's already an incredible amount to unpack here, including the fact that I believe that this light is not simply killing these people, but instead teleporting them around. So let's start off with some of these characters. We already know about Mobius N. He's a figure central to the story of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and his arc resolved within the base game. But even with that resolution, there is yet even more tragedy within his character than we previously realized, because Gondor is most likely his own son that he left out in the field as he passed away. It makes me wonder if N even realized that this is his own personal descendant that he's just murdered in cold blood. A post from Monolith Soft on Twitter suggests that he is at least aware of who Gondor actually is. We also know from the base game of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 that N's agreement to bring back Mio as M was to slaughter the people of the city. But this just solidifies how dark that act is, pushing N further into the dark depravity and belief that the way of Mobius was truly the only way. This also may suggest that we either won't see M return in Future Redeemed unless it is later on within the story, as N is actively fulfilling his part of the bargain that he struck with Zed. Let's talk about our unfortunately early in the story old mentor figure next then. Gondor, as you may have guessed, is a name so infamous in the city that in the base story of Xenoblade 3, Monica Vandom gave her own daughter that name to carry on the legacy of what that name meant. That's because in the newest character affiliation tree, which has been so graciously translated by my dear friend Magpie on Twitter and shared by Xenoblade EN, we can see that Gondor is the city's true founder, not in the same sense as the 7 founders as we know them, but in the sense that he was the one who created the concept of establishing a place for people who have broken away from the yoke of Ionios' strict laws of life. It seems that each time we saw Noah and Mio in the past during Noah's Epiphany, these were all aggregated assaults against Mobius, but not ever during a time where people wish to live in solitude and peace at the same time enough to create an area like the city. As the grandfather to Matthew and Niel and the most important figure within the city, Gondor's extremely well revered, a strong martial artist in his own right, and even trains both Matthew and Niel in the art of combat, namely fist fighting, which Matthew keenly adopts as his own class. And again, something else that the Gondor of base Xenoblade 3 also takes up. Something pretty cool to note about, by the way, as pretty much everyone knows about Matthew's similarities to Faifeng Wang of Xenogears, is that his own combat animations are even inspired from Fai's sprite art. Something I've also personally noticed that isn't talked about is that Gondor has an iris in his right eye, while both Matthew and Niel have them in their left. It seems they both took that trait after Mio. Let's then just quickly talk about Niel a bit while we're here, because her position with the story is going to be moving around quite a bit. Potentially being Mio's great-granddaughter and Rex's great-great-granddaughter, she sports an awesome design that's actually based off of Nia's original concept art, dubbed Beta Nia, from Xenoblade Chronicles 2. And already a bit of a meme within the community, it seems with each generation of Welsh anime cat girl, the ears are getting a bit smaller and something else is getting a little bit bigger. In the city's days of peace, she's known to be a very kind-hearted woman, personally taking care of the city's children. Unfortunately, she goes missing after being struck by the blast, so Matthew and gang will be on the lookout for her during the journey. Finally, on to the next scenes, and that hype will just not stop from here on out, because as that new Xenoblade DLC jazz theme hits, which by the way also incorporates the guitar from Mechanical Rhythm, we get a snapshot of all of our known playable cast one after the other. So welcome aboard Matthew, A, Glimmer, Nicole, Future Shulk, and Future Rex. Welcome to Xenoblade Chronicles 3 Future Redeemed. Revealing our new cover art for the DLC story, the art of Future Connected parallels the previous two DLC art pieces in that we have two primary protagonists looking to the side, while other pairs gaze either away or at them. In this case, the pairings are quite straightforward, and I'll get into these characters as we progress. While Nicole and Glimmer, also known as the founders of House Ortiz and Rhodes, will pair up, so will Shulk and Rex. Not the founders of, but rather the mentor figures of the founders of House Raid and Cassini. As for our primary pairing, we know Matthew is the founder of House Vandom, but Niel is that of Doyle, not A, a character we know next to nothing about, save that I'm certain that A is actually the seventh unnamed founder, who is only briefly discussed in the Central Ouroboros stone plaque. And yes, I'm sure many of you all noticed A's distinct earring, but again, I'll get into that shortly. As for our new main game art, just a few quick points of interest. For me personally, beyond our characters, the spires of Prison Island strike far up into the sky, a zone that I am happy to see perhaps get a fair bit more context within the story of this game. Some ruins in the bottom right of this image remind me almost of the architecture of the Elethro ruins of Uriah from Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Also a pretty interesting place that has very little information or lore regarding that specific section. It's also a parallel to how little we know about Prison Island, and if this is the Elethro ruins, I'm quite curious to see if we may have some ties to Prison Island and the Elethro ruins together beyond just their ambiguous origins and the fact that both had protagonists that lost a father figure at each place. But that is just my own hope. I've seen other people say it reminds them of Tornan architecture or even Tantalese ruins, given the fact that there's going to be some snowy terrain in this game. We'll just have to see. The last thing I want to point out is our beautiful new Xenoblade Chronicles logo, carrying aspects of now each of the three prior games in this saga. The motes of light and tattoo of 3 remain present, but the F in Future has the paint stroke style of Xenoblade Definitive Edition, while Pyra's flames burn around the end of Redeemed. A full-on visual representation affirming that this title will conclude the saga that began with one man's ambition. Our next scene has Glimmer confronting Nicole on the battlefield, and of course they would, because the founders' statues both describe their initial encounter on the field of battle, not as people of the city, but of soldiers of Agnes and Kevas. And now let's talk a little bit more about these two new characters. First up is Glimmer, an Agnian soldier and the founder of House Rhodes, and as I'm sure you've all noticed by that core crystal on her chest, that she's another one of Rex's kids, this time most obviously being his and Pyra's daughter. Her toned-down hair color and ponytail are almost resemblant of Beta Pyra's design, while she's going to be sporting an attitude that is very similar to Mithra. Her Agnian attire also reminds me a bit of Haze. She wields a new unique weapon that we aren't really sure the canonical name is yet, but it's roughly translated to Flame Instrument or Stringed Cane, or even Brilliant Heavenly Flame Cane. And her class is called a Shimmering Musician. She'll be playing a support role that will be mostly focused on healing arts and applying a handful of support effects. It's quite interesting to see a soldier character using music beyond simply off-seeing in the world of Ionios. Glimmer is described as having a strong personality, often acting rather selfishly, and she seems to question and disagree with life as an Agnian soldier. Fighting her on a battlefield is the founder of House Ortiz, the Kevesi soldier Nicole, a talented mechanical engineer who for some reason is either unable to call forth a blade or refuses to. So instead of using a blade for combat, he uses his technical prowess to tank with mechanical arms, and his class will be a translation equivalent of machinist, while his weapon roughly translates to variable arms, a spin-off of Poppy Cutie Pie's variable saber. Interesting choice of naming right there. As for his design, well, he may well be Shulk and Fiora's future kid. Although we know nothing about children from the Xenoblade 1's cast, he has an extreme physical appearance similar to a younger Shulk, and has both Shulk and Fiora's cowlicks, a trope called ahoge in Japanese. Now, ahoge is often associated to a character that acts aloof, and I think that's what we can expect from him. His description states he's calm and quiet, but he gets quite fired up when talking about machines. If there were any old Kevesi texts hanging around from his time, I'm sure Valdi picked up a thing or three from him. And similarly to Glimmer, he doesn't like to fight, but his nerves often get the better of him during major battles. And it's on this particular battlefield that the two of them cross paths. With the battle winding down and numbers on both sides taking very heavy casualties, the two eventually come across and are about to duke it out with one another when Matthew rushes in between them. This is essentially a play-for-play parallel with the base story of Xenoblade 3, where a Vandam stops a fight to the death between the Kevesi and Agnian protagonists and gives them a new purpose. Only of course our Matthew is going to survive this battle to see the next day. And just like how good old Mobius DJ is watching over Noah and Mio's fight, there are Mobius leaders watching over this one. Newly input caption reveals that this is Mobius R, and for those who don't remember, this is the Mobius that held the title over Ashera's colony. It's unlikely that this is one and the same individual, however. For one, they have a different Mobius form. But also this Mobius R gets a Monado through the gut by our new character and Matthew's partner A. And yes, you heard me right, that's a full-on Monado. Paired along with the earring resembling Alvis's core crystal, there's quite a lot we can discuss with this character. For one really quick note, neither Monolith Soft nor Nintendo have referred to A as a she, simply calling this character by their name at all times, at least so far. Non-binary characters are an established presence within Xenoblade games, so it may stand to reason that A is Future Redeem's representation of a non-binary character. Now, A is regarded as being calm and collected as a counter to Matthew's hot-headedness. Serving in the healer role, I have to imagine that A will be a mix of support and offense. As a Monado wielder, the combat kit could easily be augmentative in nature, with specific abilities for niche situations. As for A's extreme similarity to Alvis between the Monado, the color palette, and the earring, not to mention the fact that A may also stand quite simply for Console A or Alvis as well, we'll be getting into that as we progress the video a little bit more. One of the key things I will say I'm looking forward to finding out is if A's Monado is a blade or is it a legitimate weapon. I'm sure regardless, both Rex and Shulk will have things to say about it in the journey ahead. Speaking of those two, we'll be there in just a moment. There's just a small scene before that where a group of Resistance members are confronting our group, particularly Glimmer here. One of the characters is simply called a Liberation Soldier, and they seem to be working alongside Shulk. But interesting to note here is the woman holding a weapon to Glimmer has a name, Panakia, or probably Panacea, however they're going to pronounce it. What's more, her design and choice of weapon suggests she may be the child of Rein and Sharla. Her attire has a striking similarity design-wise to Sharla, while she wields a massive weapon, almost looking like a greatsword, but I'm getting that hint of that good old Vanguard driver vibe from the style and color. There's only 2 small scenes with her later on that shows a little bit of her design a little more, confirming again the extreme similarity to Sharla's choice of attire. One last thing with her is that I personally believe that she may be the founder Raid. The trailer presents her as taking orders directly under Shulk, so it may stand to reason that Raid and Cassini's actual founders will have secondary character roles. Now, I personally wish those founders were also playable, or maybe they'll serve as a 7th party member if that is a returning feature, though that's not been confirmed yet. We don't know if that's the case, but so long as they at least have the same level of writing as, say, good old Borealis, I'll be content enough. As a Liberation Soldier questions what they should do with Glimmer, it's time to talk about our boy, or should I say, our man Shulk, sporting his signature homemade Monado but with a flowing mane, cape over one shoulder, and oh yeah, the right arm. All inspired by Dunban, though obviously, in his case, the arm's bionic and actually works pretty well. Despite having said bionic arm, which, by the way, was made by Riku, yes, Riku the Chatopon, what the hell, he only fights by wielding with his left arm. What's more, his character art itself is a nod to the original Xenoblade Chronicles 1 character art of Dunban himself. And despite the fact that his weapon in the game is technically a blade, he still enters combat as if his Monado is resting on his back. It's such a nice little feature. So then, in combat, Shulk will be a tank. His class roughly translates as Grand Soldier, so yet another Dunban inspiration, perhaps serving as the dodge tank as opposed to Nicole's damage-soaked tank playstyle. Yet, it seems Nicole has quite a way to go, because in this next scene, as we see him preparing to block a hit for Glimmer, the legendary leader of the Garfon mercenaries, Rex himself appears, and there is so much to say about him. For one, obviously the extent of just how big a growth spurt he had from the events of Xenoblade 2 to now. Also really cool to see, Rex's design implements some of Zeke's traits with a little bit of salvager flair, but his combat animations are actually inspired from Morag's dual wielding. It's really cool to see all of this just brought up in our boy as he grew up, taking inspiration from those around him. Just as described in the Cassini statue text, he lost the use of his left eye, though it does glint a bit from his Ouroboros symbol. Rex's class is the Master Driver, wielding not only the signature blades of Pyra and Mithra, but also Numa's weapon as well. And he's going to be using that power as our main damage dealer alongside Matthew. As much as I'd like to say that he could still draw on Numa's strength just because of how awesome he's become, it's most likely that he's calling these weapons as blades in the same fashion that all other people in Ionios do as well. But it's still pretty cool that he's drawing both weapons at once. The man is so powerful that Rex can even slash through a Pharaonis' flame clock all on his own. And what a perfect opportunity for him to do so during his opening scene, as a fused Mobius is attacking the party. Before we move on to said Mobius, however, let's consult the character tree one more time to see all of our pairings. Sure enough, Matthew and A seem to complement each other well, Matthew scolding A for one reason or another, while A complains of Matthew's constant rushing into battle. Nicole is talking Glimmer's ears off about tech while Glimmer just wants him to shut up, and their personalities seem to be polar opposites in combat. As for Shulk and Rex, handshakes all around, Shulk seeing Rex as highly reliable, Rex impressed with Shulk's deduction skills, and hey, wait a minute. Back to the Mobius then. This is a fusion of Mobius Q and R, and again for those who don't remember, Q is the Mobius in charge of Valdi's colony. Again, these are not likely the same Mobius that we have in Xenoblade 3's base timeline. It's just the mantle of those letters that they're associated with that I'm trying to bring up. Well, it seems that the Mobius of this time had a few different tactics up their sleeves, and these two decided that when the battle was getting tough, to fuse their respective Pharaonesses together along with themselves. The trailer transitions then from a handful of combat scenes, and there's honestly quite a lot that can be extracted. I don't want to spend too much time in this section, so I'm going to shoot out my takeaways. Ready? Go. The combat UI is largely the same, with minor quirks changed to fit for this game's version of combat. Kevesi, Agnian, and Fusion Arts all return, but with a twist, in that Fusion Arts channel the power of the Ouroboros. Ouroboros themselves aren't present in this game's combat. However, all of our heroes instead use Ouroboros power to fuel their Fusion Arts. You'll even see faint silhouettes of everyone's Ouroboros models when they're using these Fusion Arts, and they sort of do act like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure stands. As for the button we'd usually press to become Ouroboros, well, that's been replaced with a new mechanic, the Union Combo. Certain character combos can work together to unleash powerful combo attacks. For one, Nicole and Glimmer's Hellstream is just one such combo. I want to bring up A is using Shulk's signature arts, such as Shaker Edge, and their special being Vision, literally granting them a window of time where they can act on other abilities. And of course, that is a gorgeous animation that makes full use of the runes from Xenoblade Chronicles 1's gods, Mayneth and Zanza, and now Alvis. Meanwhile, Rex sports so much raw energy in his kit, his special literally being Infinity Blade. Anchor Shot and Double Spinning Edge also return, and as you can see, he will be getting that charge back when he lands on crit. That's right, y'all, Xenoblade 2 is back at it again. At the same time, Shulk is throwing down the gauntlet with his own classic special, the Monado Buster, but both Stream Edge and Stream Edge make a return. He even performs a union combo called Monado Crash with Matthew, and another brand new ability, Monado Rage, forces opponents to focus onto him. The final combat scene shows Nicole and Glimmer using Hellstream like I mentioned earlier. These fights all seem to be taking place either on Bionis Leg or a snowy region that some people say is Capricorn, but others may also suspect a little bit of Tantal could be at play as well. What's interesting in the background though, if this image, is that we can make out a brand new terrain we aren't really familiar with several prominent spikes and a horn jutting out. The porous openings and circular shape give me Genbu vibes, or we may have a new terrain entirely. I recall seeing similar concepts in the Xenoblade 3 art book as well. Turning our attention back to the battle, we can see a few new things, but most notably is that the Fog Beasts, actual Fog Beasts from Xenoblade Future Connected, are active and hostile within the world of Ionios at this stage of its history. What's more, look at the enemy UI. A creature controlled by the fog seems to be denoted by a feral marking to the left-hand side, and it has no monster type whatsoever in the upper left corner. The feral teeth sign may also indicate something else, however. Notice in this cutscene that when Shulk strikes, the exact moment that the hit lands, Matthew takes damage in near perfect synchrony. It might just be coincidence, but it could also just be a new possible form of spike damage that Fog Beasts carry around. There's quite a bit more to talk about mechanically about the game, but I'm going to cover those very briefly after the rest of the trailer is discussed. Following a fade to black, a somber theme that I'm sure is going to be breaking our hearts by the end of this game begins to play, and the scene opens up with Matthew trying to comfort Niel, who's recalling someone she embraced as they passed away into golden motes right in her arms. This is going to be a scene just prior to the initial attack on the city, and likely after the training one we saw earlier. This next transition immediately pulled at my heart as we get a full view of the Trinity processor, while Shulk describes something he heard from Melia, something about a gift from Alvis, and I'm going to talk a bit more about that line specifically in just a short while. So, a few other quick things here. For one, I believe this is the first time where we've seen all three Aegis cores present within the Trinity processor at the same time. For one, I believe that this is the first time where we've seen all 3 Aegis cores present within the Trinity processor at the same time, meaning we may likely have a scene showing the moment Alvis, aka Ontos, triggers a space-time transition event to go to the world of Bionis and Mekanis. What's more, under Ontos' core crystal is a scripture from the Bible's book of Proverbs written in Latin, a theme that's concurrent with other Aegises as well. So under Ontos is Proverbs 3:13, which reads, "Blessed are those who find wisdom, those who gain understanding." It fits well with Alvis's core motif of always being a being who seems to know what's about to happen next and is just generally very wise and careful and methodical in how he acts. Lastly, Ontos' core crystal is going to be heavily present within this game. It's on Alvis's body, but also A has an earring of it, and it will still appear later on with other people. This has caused some fans to theorize, including myself, that Ontos is capable of splitting their respective form into multiple beings who, much like the Bible verse describes, can act autonomously off of their own wisdom and understanding. It may help to explain the obstinate godlike being that Alvis represents, while A looks to be following a different path. The next scene has the group arrive at a very familiar scene, the front entrance to Colony 9. As rustic and overtaken as the Fallen Arm back in the days of Xenoblade Chronicles 1, New Colony 9 is home to the Liberation, Shulk and Rex's front. Here's also where we see an extra snippet of Panacea. With another quick glance at some of her outfit, we can very clearly see the style of Sharla at play. I'd be quite surprised if House Cassini's founder also doesn't show up around here. For all we know, since we haven't seen Mithra and Rex's kid, he may very well have another daughter that's more suited to protecting the Liberator's home base than out on the front lines. But I digress. I don't doubt for a second that everyone who's played Xenoblade Chronicles 1 all the way through wished they could at least walk around the new Colony 9 after the ending events of that game, and now we have that opportunity. This will undoubtedly be our central hub for the majority of the game for the reasons that I've discussed in my previous videos regarding future Redeemed's leaks. But then something strange. We go back to that initial confrontation scene between Rex and Shulk against Alvis, and now we have Zed, the ringleader of Mobius itself, standing with them in opposition to Alvis. Unflinching against Alvis, who Zed dubs as his god, Zed questions the lengths that Alvis wishes to erase, even something of their own apparent creation. This is actually really crazy because if you've seen my most recent collaboration video with Mad Kaiser, he actually brought up the idea that Alvis, the true Consul A, the founder of Mobius, proclaims the beginning, and then he believes that Zed's role was then to preserve the end. It seems, however, that Alvis fully meant the words they spoke to Zanza, not only just as a being that has been since the beginning, but the one who will proclaim the end. And testament to those words, Alvis will unflinchingly rebuke the will of his own creation, Zed, who wishes just to simply preserve the end in the endless now. It's a jarring juxtaposition when compared to the treatment of Zanza and his creations, the beings of Bionis. An extended cut of the scene also shows Alvis sweep away Rex and Shulk in a wave of blinding light, which may play into the reason as to why they are within the world of Ionios. I also have some theories regarding that light. If it does indeed have the power to transport things around, this may actually still be the power of the conduit, and I'll talk about that towards the end of the video. The scenes then switch to Matthew and A taking on N, but the location is none other than Prison Island itself. While they struggle to overtake N, there's something incredible that many people have missed. For not even a handful of frames, at about 2 minutes and 5 seconds into the trailer, we can see 3 people in the back also participating in this fight. We can make out the one on the left as Panacea, thanks to those large boots of hers, Nicole in the middle thanks to the mechanical arms, but the one on the right has an exceedingly strong similarity to Pandoria from Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Between the clothing, the staff shining light, and the scrunkly looking green hair, is this her or somehow a descendant of Zeke and hers? As the fight progresses, Prison Island itself activates with the same energy that was powerful enough to even destroy Face Mechon, so it's quite clear there is some power source still active, or a being capable of controlling Prison Island present at this time. It can't be Melia due to her being locked within Origin at this point in the story, so an entity with that kind of power level or recognition like Alvis, or maybe even A, would have to be activating Prison Island. A small break from the tension of combat proceeds, with scenes of Glimmer talking to her father, expressing how glad she is to be on the side of the Liberators, a choice that she is able to make for herself, again stressing just how conflicted she feels as a former soldier of Agnes. Nicole and Shulk are chatting as well, again with the suspawn. Okay, it's time to talk. Sorry, Nicole, it's time to talk about Riku. You know it, I know it, everyone knows it, that Riku is no ordinary Nopon. We aren't entirely still sure why, but he is. I've already talked about it before about how strange Nopon are in Xenoblade Chronicles 3 because their notes in the community system show their ages and many of them are above 20 to like even the mid 40s. Yet they live in colonies and none of the soldiers seem to even question that lifespan of theirs. But him being here now implies that Riku is the second oldest living Nopon in Xenoblade history, surpassed in age only by the great and glorious Nopon Archsage. We don't know the rhyme or reason, but remember when I talked about how Ontos could have potentially split into several forms? Well, who's to say that there are just two? That's right, a third being in the guise of Riku. While Logos was representative of one, Numa was representative of two with Pyra and Mithra. Some people think that Ontos may go as far as 3. Some fans have been proponents of this theory, suggesting it may be a tie-in to the religious implications of, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And I can sort of see that notion behind it. You have an unflinching judge in Alvis weighing the main path to take, as to other parts of the Trinity observe with different viewpoints. A more calculated and pessimistic A, and a more aloof and optimistic Riku. Even if it's not the case, there's just no way that there isn't some sort of tie-in between Ontos and Riku at this point, right? Anyway, moving back to the scene, Nicole is tuning up Shulk's bionic arm and expressing his relief in that by simply knowing who he's meant to be fighting, he feels himself becoming a bit less timid. Again, that bionic arm, by the way, of Shulk's, he didn't make that himself, Riku did. There's absolutely no going anywhere without this little guy, I tell ya. 2 more scenes to go and we are now at the one that I actually finally lost it at. As A questions the desires of humanity, commenting on how even having built a perfect world, they still desired more, something A refers to as the beyond. The flashbacks to the world tree, aka the beanstalk Radamanthus, and Siren begin to play. Perhaps A is alluding to the wonders that Klaus pursued through his use of the conduit, because that's exactly the second part of this specific scene, as the man who started this whole saga as the skies of his world burned, made one zealous attempt to start over. We could potentially be having a third replay of this cutscene, and that is crazy to me. It's also not lost on me either that A is aware of the past before Klaus's experiment, and lending further credibility to the theory that A and Alvis are but 2 forms of Ontos. And at the very last scene, we have Niel reappearing in front of Matthew, after being separated. It may not even be too far into the game given that this scene takes place within the Gar Plains, right outside the Liberator's home base. Plain to see, however, she's not nearly the same person that she was before. For one, she has Ontos' actual core crystal. Not just like A's earring, not just like Alvis' smaller necklace, no, the actual full core crystal of Alvis is placed squarely on her chest, right over her hereditary blade core crystal. Sporting a full new design, her gear immediately reminds me, of course, of Persona, and at least from the waist up, I'm also reminded of plug suits that are often shown in mecha anime like Evangelion. And interestingly, the color palette used for her armor is the same color palette that Mobius used in their console form. If anything, we can also just joke that Alvis is a big Persona fan, or in this case, Fursona, am I right? Alright, but I digress. It's clear to see some sort of deal has been struck, and now Niel is most likely another driver to Ontos, even more so than Ontos technically was to Shulk, especially given the context of Xenoblade 3's Shulk that isn't wielding a Monado but a blade weapon. What's more, remember that quote from Shulk saying something about a gift from Niel? Well, the name Niel itself quite literally means gift from God, and it's quite clear that Alvis is being portrayed as a god, especially from a being of near-nigh omnipotence within the world of Ionios from the perspective of Mobius Zed. So here we see that Niel, who is a founder of the city, also serves as both Mobius and a wielder to an actual Monado, not simply a blade. In essence, Niel just screams of Alvis's influence, even giving off the same light energy that emanates from Ontos at the starting scene, which leads into my last main theory for this video. What if Ontos' raw power is still in connection with the conduit, or is at least at a stage that they can enact powers similar in scale? A blast of light removed Shulk and Rex from Ontos' sight, and a similar beam of light displaces Niel and the other members of the city. One aspect of the conduit's energy saw objects and beings flung into entirely different dimensions. It's not all too unthinkable that a power similar in scale to the conduit is at play here, because in the time of the events that precede the worlds colliding, both worlds found a means to communicate with one another via the medium of light, as Nia described it. The same form of energy the conduit is loosely described to use. It's all conjecture, I know, but I can't help but feel there is something along these lines working in the background, especially given the vagary of the medium of light that was explained by Nia in the base story of Xenoblade 3. As for Niel, she will no doubt be a protagonist and join the cause when she confronts Matthew and the other founders, as her statue describes, but it remains to be seen if she will have a bit of an antagonistic period for a small time. What's more, that's now 3 founders that aren't playable, given that Shulk, Rex, and A take up 3 of the 6 spots, leaving no space for the actual founders Raid, actual founder Cassini, and now founder Doyle. Though it's yet to be shown, I wonder if we will see Niel, Panacea, and whoever Cassini's founder is join us as hero members in the same vein as the heroes of the base story of Xenoblade Chronicles 3. With all of our trailer finally wrapped up, there are just a few quick points that I want to go across before concluding this video, and that's the other game mechanics and features we currently know about. Again, more are subject to be discovered or affirmed by Monolith Soft in the coming days, but here's what we know so far. First up, as I've said before, just about every single leak has so far been confirmed, bar about 1 or 2 features. Here are all of the features and mechanics we currently know about. The largest of these is something known as Kizuna points, roughly translated to something like affinity or bond points. Unlike previous titles that use them, however, these bond points will instead be gathered from a plethora of activities, from filling out this game's Collectopedia and Ennepedia, defeating unique monsters, progressing the story, interacting with people, and adding NPCs to the community system, and possibly completing achievements and side quests. Affinity points can be used to enhance characters of your choice or progress skill trees, but it remains to be seen if skill links will also return as a feature. Already in those last 2 sentences, there's quite a bit to unpack, so let's start with the Collectopedia, which will act exactly like the one from Xenoblade Chronicles 1. The Ennepedia, then, is a new monster encyclopedia that registers monsters when you beat them for the first time. It seems that they will not only tell you some details of that monster, such as their drops, but you'll also be working towards a percentage as seen up above. Defeating a certain amount of those enemies then will also give you more bond points. It's my hope then that bond points are a currency that is stacked as you replay the game, because then that will add such a huge level of replayability to this DLC story. The very last detail we know is that Riku will be serving to strengthen our weapons in exchange for money and materials, similar to the base story's weapon upgrades, but hopefully not as tedious. It seems that the power of the 7 Nappan is equivalent to that of Riku in his prime. This upgrade menu also gives us our first look at each character's campfire art, as well as their weapon symbols. And that is my final analysis of everything we know about Xenoblade Chronicles 3 Future Redeemed. Thank you so very much to all of you who have stuck with me through this long video, and thank you especially more so for everyone who has stuck with me for now over a year of Xenoblade Chronicles analysis. This has been such a wonderful journey that I didn't think I would go nearly so far in seeing be made a reality. I don't intend to stop anytime soon, and I'll continue to make and cover Xenoblade content, as well as content for other things that I am passionate about, but this is where I'm going to be ending this discussion for now. And also, it is with great pleasure that I can tell all of you I will also be streaming Future Redeemed either on launch if there's a midnight release, or most of Tuesday, the game's actual release day, with more streams planned throughout the week. I look forward to seeing some of you there if you aren't busy playing and experiencing the finale to the Claw Saga yourself. Thank you all very much again for joining me on this journey so far, and as always, have a great day.